Today, I'm putting 10 miles onto my winter moccasins in Hocking Hills State Park, Ohio's most rugged region. It is beautiful, and it's full of history, from the ancients to the 18th century. You learn a lot over 10 miles with nothing but wool and buckskin between you and the frozen ground, and I'll be sharing those lessons throughout the video. Ash Cave is my first stop. Archaeologists estimate that the first prehistoric American Indians arrived in this region about 7,000 years ago. And Ash Cave, at 90 feet high and 700 feet across, became a favorite campsite to the first hunters who pushed into this region. The first white settlers here found ash piles 100 feet long, 30 feet wide, and 3 feet deep, accumulated over thousands of years of the Miami, the Shawnee, the Wyandot, the Delaware, using this as a place to camp while hunting. I highly encourage you to do more research into the history of this area and to come and visit it yourself. It truly is never done justice in film or photography. The sound of that waterfall echoing in the cave, that's the same sound that Shawnee hunters would have laid back and fallen asleep to. And that was just a moment ago in the geologic timescale. Now, there's two disclaimers that I want to make sooner than later in this video. And the first is that this being a state park, there are public works like this bridge that make this place safe and accessible for everybody to come and enjoy. The Hocking Hills region receives as many visitors per year as Yellowstone and Yosemite National Parks. And the installation of signs like that one that are informational, that enhance this experience, steps like the ones up there along that cliff, and those bridges like the ones that I just walked over are what enables people to get out into nature regardless of their handicap status or level of fitness. Everybody can come out and enjoy Hocking Hills State Park because of those works. Other thing is that I'm carrying this pipe instead of a flintlock. This place gets a lot of visitors. I don't need to be out here interpreting Ohio's open constitutional carry gun laws to people all day long. And it's just a lot easier to carry a cold pipe like this. Really, it fulfills the same purpose. During the time period you're gripping a cold gun barrel like that, it's gonna freeze your hand. You can feel that cold creeping up your arm inch by inch. This pipe does the exact same things. From the experiential side, it's not a significant blow to this experience. My first lesson was already sinking in as I came into my second mile. My feet were warm and dry, but my upper body was really starting to heat up. This is the same outfit that I've worn on summer evenings, plus a cap and blanket. I thought I'd be too cold. From this point forward, I'd be adjusting my hat and blanket and rotating between opening and closing my hunting shirt to regulate my body temperature. The centerpiece of the Hocking Hills region is a 10-mile loop connecting the best sites. These caves and hollows were formed over millions of years of erosion by two main waterways loosely forming one long gorge. Ash Cave is near the southern end of this loop. Cedar Falls is about in the middle, and the rest of the main sites are further north. I reached Cedar Falls within 2.5 miles. You know, it's sites like this one that really have not changed. The way into them has changed, the trails are updated, there's nice steps like we've talked about, but this is about the same as somebody would have beheld it 300, 400, 1,000 years ago in the wintertime, about this time in January. So it's a really cool thing to be able to immerse yourself here in this region where there's such rich history. And to be able to see the same things that people were looking at in the past. You can't always get that at historical sites. The next segment of trail will be my push to the northern end of the loop, where I'll see the other main sites and learn some more about myself and my gear. This is where I can chew up some mileage and really speed things up. It's also some deceptively difficult terrain, especially when it's frozen. It's a little sketchy in moccasins.
Man, we're making it happen.
I'm trying.
That's awesome.
It's easy to work up a sweat down in here.
Me too.
And sweat in the winter can be dangerous. So I'm operating with a new motto these next few miles: slow is fast. Doing something a little slower, but getting it right the first time is ultimately a net gain when it comes to efficiency. Then as I move across some nasty terrain the next couple of miles, I'm applying this lesson as a mantra to find sure footing, keep from sweating, and overall move through this area without an injury that would slow the rest of my hike. Walking with smooth-soled moccasins is a lot different than rigid sole hiking boots. Slow is fast. I'm gonna chew up the mileage here, but I'm being really intentional about it.
I've talked about the sights and features in Hocking Hills, but let me pull our perspective outward a little on something else that really enhances the historic accuracy here. These woods around me, they're trees directly descended from the ancestral trees that would have shaded the Adena culture or Shawnee, Wyandotte, or Delaware back when they were running around on this land. There was logging here in the past, but there are so many untouchable nooks and crannies in these gorges that once that logging ceased, the land naturally repopulated from those nooks. The same species bounced back, and I'm not just talking about plants. There are occasional black bear sightings in remote areas of the park today. We might not have elk or wolves as there would have been in the 18th century here, but it's a special thing knowing the elements of this experience haven't changed in a few thousand years, from the hemlock trees, which are holdouts from the last ice age, down to the species of bird singing in the trees. Most of this landscape and the noises among it are as they would have appeared in the 18th century.
It's real icy out here. All these little creeks and things that most of these trails parallel, they rise and fall and they get the trails to various points of iciness. I've been very pleasantly surprised by these moccasins. What I've found is that icy ground seems to do all right, as long as there's little undulations in it and there's some texture to it. Because even if it's straight ice and it's kind of wavy ice because it's solidified over rocks and things on the ground, the real soft soles of these moccasins will fill those little gaps under your feet. And it almost gives you better traction than you would have with a hard, rubber, rigid-soled shoe in modern times. The real problem that I've had, though, has been icy wood, because that wood is flat. There's none of those little undulations in it, nothing for the moccasins to try and get a grip on, and that's where your feet can go right out from under you.
I was also surprised by how well the moccasins were holding up. These are more than a year old, and I haven't waterproofed them at all since the first coat when they were initially assembled. Despite that, I was most definitely dry, and I am very, very content with the 18th century waterproofing recipe that I used on these. And that brings me to my third lesson from this experience. Footwear is the one thing that just seems to crush living history in the wintertime. And we barely recover from it in the spring or late fall, which is when I see people with modern shoes on in historical dress. But I really think that I've cracked the code with these winter moccasins, and I can't wait to bring a full video on the topic now that I've confirmed how well they work. This hike, this is the crowning confirmation after a year of use on the same exact pair. They're durable, they're well insulated, they're waterproof, and to my surprise on this hike, they actually offer decent traction.
I've been out here hiking around enough that I'm willing for a break, and draped over my shot pouch, got a little food wallet with some jerk and some chocolate. So I'm gonna try and get the blood sugar back up. This will take the energy out of you. These hilly trails, by the time I complete this 10 miles, I will have experienced over 1,000 feet in total elevation change. And that's here in Ohio. That's saying something. You don't get that in all places of the state. Another musing that I've had out here on these trails is that there are historians that I think that really have a fantastic appreciation for history and the people who made it. But it's hard to have respect for a Shawnee hunter, an unnamed, unmarked grave somewhere in the state containing the remains of somebody who spent their life chasing game all up and down through these cliffs and hills, just how hard that life would have been. This gives you an appreciation for the common man. This gives you an appreciation for people beyond Tecumseh and Blue Jacket and Kenton and Boone and big names like that. It really is important to get out here and do common man things in common man places in the time period. Get an appreciation for the bigger picture in the 18th century.
It wasn't much longer before I made it to Lower
In
Falls.
the summertime, this is quite the spectacle. That waterfall, if you look a little closely at it, you can see it kind of has two steps to it, and it just thunders. The noise of that is really impressive down here in this little valley. Now, I am down at the end of this gorge that I've been in for about the last 2 miles. The only way up out of this is a steep elevation gain up the hill of one of these two cliffs to either side of me. So we're gonna put these moccasins to the test to continue to keep the pedal down on this journey here. Really logging some miles, and so far my feet remain warm and dry. I haven't started to sweat yet. I've been moving at a pretty good pace, trying not to let that sweat build. So this has been a really good journey so far, and I'm looking forward to more.
The climb straight up and out of here is brutal, but it's well worth it. From here, I'll be able to hit all the great sights on the northern end of the park, then start to loop back down to the south, all within about half a mile. It's at this point that, despite trying to connect with history here, I am intensely grateful for the modern infrastructure. In the time period, had I been moving up the waterway, I would have been totally trapped at the end of this gorge. And that's great if you're cornering game. I imagine hunters would have driven game right up to the falls. But today, the spiral stairs and this tunnel, which is a park favorite, are huge assets that keep all these visitors, myself included, safe. I encountered lesson number 4 as I made my way to Upper Falls. Since I had cell service here, I saw for the first time a voicemail from a DNR law enforcement officer.
So you wouldn't have any issue carrying your musket while hiking on trail?
Next time I'll leave my metal pipe at home, I feel a lot more confident knowing the DNR is on board with my carrying out here. The Upper Falls doesn't really hit me the same way as the other sites. It's special because it's the start to all these really fantastic, bigger waterfalls downstream. But as you turn back to the south to round out the loop, you drop down into the gorge for some sights that you miss on the way to Upper Falls, the first being Devil's Bathtub. This is a violent eddy in Old Man's Creek that looks deceptively inviting, like you could bathe in it. It's even shaped like a tub, but legend has it, the tub swirls all the way down to Hades. In reality, it's just a few feet deep, but once you're in, it's almost impossible to get out. That aggressive current is what has carved out the next big site, Old Man's Cave. This might be the most iconic site in all of Ohio. And here is some documentable 18th century history, because this cave was occupied by frontiersmen, perhaps the first to the area. There's conflicting accounts about exactly who the first old man of Old Man's Cave was. Richard Rowe was a hermit, documented as having moved into the cave's largest recess, which is 200 feet across and 50 feet tall. He had entered the Ohio River Valley from the Cumberland Mountains in 1796 to try and establish a trading post, but it seems like that's about where he falls off written history. Other people have surmised that as he explored this region, he must have detoured up what is now Old Man's Creek and found this spot. Supposedly, he lived in the cave with his 2 dogs for quite some time. Then there was Richard Retzler. He's documented as a War of 1812 veteran who had stashed some money in the cave and returned later to find it. The namesake of the cave isn't as much in the lives of either man, but in their deaths. Both, supposedly, were killed in some kind of rifle misfire and are supposedly buried in the cave. A sign from the Parks Department says it's very well possible that some combination of the stories are true and that there was, in fact, only one Richard. That makes the most sense to me given what research I've done, and the Richard Rowe story seems the strongest. The cave itself drops down through 150 feet of sandstone, with all kinds of little nooks and tunnels and stairs and bridges that have been installed throughout the past century. It's rugged, and it would have been even more so for the old man who lived here.
Well, I made a really tough decision a couple of minutes back. There's 2 trails to get back. There's the way that I came, which is tough, a little more rugged, packed dirt, in my case packed snow. But it goes down along this waterway here. And it's nice, it's picturesque, and the first time through it was really cool. There's these little gorges and drops, and about every 50 feet there's some kind of little land feature, a little 6-foot climb over some rocks, or a 50-foot thing with stairs cut into it. And this trail down here along the waterway, I got to imagine was developed over a long period of time. People during the 18th century were most certainly traveling along waterways. You start to read journals and you see either up at the tops of ridges or down along water lines. And that's the fork in the road that I'm talking about, because up above me, at the top of those cliffs, is a ridgetop trail. And I said I got 5 miles back, but that goes for 3 miles. And so I could have gone up there and I wouldn't be slipping and sliding all over down in here, and I'd be up in the sun because the sun's starting to go down. Got another 2 hours before actual sundown, and I can make the 5 miles in that. But it would be nice to be up in those warm rays of sun. Most of all, though, that ridgetop trail is level. It's nice, packed gravel. And I was looking at this literal fork in the road, the easy way back, or the hard way back, the same way that I came. And I wanted to go easy on myself. I wanted to take that ridge trail, but I didn't. Took the hard one. The reason I'm out here is to push myself, to slip around like that, to go up these little slopes, to be colder down here near the water, to work up a sweat, get cold, get sore feet. I'm doing all of those things right now. And I could have taken the sunny way, but I wanted it to be hard. Here I am. It's hard.
It was at this point, now, really pushing myself, that I was starting to really get thirsty. I hadn't had anything more substantial than jerk to eat, but water, you just gotta listen to your body and stay hydrated. And I had pushed off drinking anything for so long because, to be honest, I was a little intimidated by the water filter that I was carrying. I've been trying to get away from carrying a canteen because these woodsmen weren't packing in clean water, they were drinking it off the ground. And a life straw will let you do that. But I had never used mine. I didn't really trust it. And once I was actually out here thinking about the consequences of 5 million annual visitors on the waterways, that salty snow melt off the parking lots, well, it made me think I might try and grit out the 10 miles without water. Bad move. Turns out when I finally worked up the courage,
That is good.
that water out of a life straw is phenomenal. Absolutely fantastic. Seriously, I may never carry a canteen again on a solo living history experience. Guzzling cold water brought my core temperature down, and with the sun dropping lower and lower and my being down along the cold riverbank, I really started experimenting with staying warm, but not too warm. Once again, you have to mitigate sweat alongside exertion, and I found something really interesting about using a blanket as an outer layer. It turns out those contemporary paintings of American Indians with a blanket tossed over one shoulder, that's not just to carry the blanket. And this was the 6th lesson that I picked up out here on the trail. See, I found out that a folded blanket over one shoulder, given you've got some other layers on, it generally keeps in about half the heat as it would if it were draped around both shoulders. At this point, I'd been out in the cold for hours. I was really sensitive to these temperature changes. And man, is that blanket ever an adjustable thermostat? How many times it's folded, whether it's over one shoulder or both, how long you let it hang, all those variables really have an impact on your temperature.
Well, I'm stopped for a minute. My hip flexors are just locked up. The hard thing about wearing moccasins is the fact that you don't have a rigid sole in the shoe. A modern shoe, you can push off with your toe. In fact, you do subconsciously. But in a moccasin on the snow, when you push off with your toe, the whole tip of the moccasin just slips off the ice. You don't actually get any forward momentum from it. Instead, you have to sort of march. You plant your foot, then you have to very intentionally lift up your leg at the hip and at the knee and plant it another foot forward. And that, over the course of 10 miles, as it turns out, will lock up your hip flexors something fierce if you're not used to it.
As I waddled myself back towards Ash Cave, I started slipping around a lot. What was loose snow before had now been in shade for a few hours, and it froze stiff. Things were pretty slick.
Oh, there we go. Ash Cave, baby. Well, I made it back to Ash Cave. That's 10 miles in the books. In fact, there's a stretch of trail. It's labeled as 0.2 miles. That goes about a full mile. I didn't really realize it until the way back. There's graffiti on the sign that says fake news, 1 mile. It's about a mile. And boy, oh boy, tough hike today. Learned a lot about these moccasins here. It's been a successful hike, a hard one, but a successful one in that I learned a lot. You will just abuse your feet on surfaces like this without much padding in there. I got my wool socks on, 2 layers of wool, and then the actual leather. And that's not doing much. Not after that's been ground down to nothing over those first 5 miles. It's feeling pretty good. Mile 6, mile 7, started to really feel it. By mile 8, intense pain in the hip flexors had fully set in. And it's just a result of my not doing 10 milers all the time. Guys in the 18th century probably would have had to push it a lot further before they started feeling pains like that. But by mile 8, I was having that pain in the hip flexors, and you don't really think about, you start feeling sore, you don't really think about it, and then it hits you, I'm sore. And then you start thinking about it. And when you're out here on your own, that's all you got to think about, is how much your feet hurt, how much your toes hurt. One toenail is just stabbing into me. I got some real mileage in, and it's a change of pace for the knees, for the feet, all those little joints. I can feel them individually at the base of your toes. I'm fortunate. I feel real blessed to be able to get out here and do this, to be in shape, to have found this hobby as young as I did. Those of you that are watching that are not able to get out and do this, you've been on my mind. This whole hike, I've been thinking about you. This has been hard, but I really do. I think about those of you that can't do it, and I get out here and film these videos for you.
Now, I'm sure other lessons will be pulled from this experience for a long time to come. Maybe you identified some things that you can improve on your own kit that I was completely oblivious to. But the last lesson that I actively extracted during this experience was on the final quarter mile out. That rattling noise had gotten so annoying over 10 miles that I vowed to go home and adjust the length of my powder measure, pick, and brush so that the three don't bang together with each step, so that I would never, ever be subject to that again.
Well, it was a hard hike. I'm feeling a lot better because I can see my car. And boy, that was tough. But part of me wishes that I was sitting down to a fire in a little lean-to, getting ready to do it all again tomorrow. And I guess that's the beautiful thing about being human, is a willingness or a desire to do hard things. Go do something hard today.
Thanks so much for watching to the end. Please start your comment with the word frozen. I know I was feeling frozen by the end of this hike. And remember, if you're thinking about getting out there into the wintertime with new gear that you're unfamiliar with, take real good care of yourself. Be safe.